Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today in this video I'm going to talk to you on how to select most appropriate rice varieties for a patient with diabetes mellitus. At the end of this video, I'm sure you will change your mind. In patients with diabetes mellitus, the blood glucose level is generally high. When the blood glucose level is high, they tend to develop acute and chronic complications. So to prevent them developing these complications, we have to maintain their blood glucose level within normal ranges. In another video, I'll be showing you how people develop diabetes mellitus and what their clinical features are. This blood glucose level depends on many factors, and we will be discussing what are those factors are. As you can see in this diagram, blood glucose level is affected by many factors. Among them, endogenous processes are there, such as glycogenolysis and gluconeogenesis. And also, it depends on the drugs taken by the patient. Some drugs increase the blood glucose level, some drugs reduce the blood glucose level. And also, physical activities are a significant factor which can reduce the blood glucose level if done regularly. Among the factors, diet plays a key role. In our diets, staple food is generally a starchy food. These starchy foods contain starch as the main carbohydrate, and at the end of the digestion it provides glucose, and then this glucose is absorbed into bloodstream. So these starchy food categories include cereals, yams, starchy tubers, roots, starchy tree crops. Among those, our staple food is rice, which is a cereal. As you can see in this diagram, after each meal there is a rise of blood glucose level. This rise of blood glucose level depends on the amount of carbohydrate in the diet, and also it depends on the quality of the carbohydrate. If a patient with diabetes mellitus taking large loads of carbohydrate in the diet with high glycemic index food items, their blood glucose control is going to be poor. Glycemic index for a food is defined based on the carbohydrate content of a particular food. This glycemic index is given for food items which are rich in carbohydrate. It depends on the rate of digestion and absorption of starch present in the food item. Based on the glycemic index, food items are categorized into three categories: high, moderate, and low. To maintain the blood glucose control, diabetes patients are advised to get the food items which are in the moderate or low glycemic index category. Glycemic index of a food item depends on the rate of digestion and absorption of starch. When it comes to rice grain, it depends on the fiber content. Higher the fiber content, it lowers the glycemic index, and also it depends on the nature of the starch. Higher amounts of resistant starch lowers the glycemic index. It also is influenced by processing techniques. Milling and parboiling are the main processing techniques that you are interested about. In this diagram, you can see the basic structure of the rice grain. You have the husk outermost, and then you get the bran, and then the endosperm and the embryo. What happens during milling? During milling, there is removal of the husk, and also there is removal of the bran and parts of embryo. This bran is rich with water-soluble vitamin, minerals, lipids and protein. And with milling, as there is loss of bran and part of embryo, there is loss of water-soluble vitamins and iron, selenium and some amount of protein and lipid. So there is loss of nutrients during milling. This loss depends on the extent of milling. What else happens with milling? During milling, there is loss of bran and portion of germ. So there is relative rise of the starch content. And also there is loss of fiber. Ultimately, that increases the glycemic index of the rice. What happens with parboiling? In parboiling, rice grains with husk are soaked and boiled or steamed and then dried, and then they are subjected to milling. With parboiling, what happens? There is inward movement of water-soluble nutrients from bran to endosperm. Those include amino acids, protein, vitamins and minerals. So they are moved to the inside of the grain. So there is reduced loss of these nutrients during milling, processing and cooking. Further, there is reduction in the phytate content, so that increases the bioavailability of iron in the rice. This parboiling technique improves the nutritional values of the rice. What else happens with parboiling? With parboiling, there is gelatinization of starch, and that makes the starch compacted. When it is dried, the grain becomes hard. That increases the yield of the rice. And also with parboiling, the amount of resistant starch is increased, and that reduces the digestibility of starch. So the rise of blood glucose occurs at a slow and steady rate by parboiled rice compared to raw rice, which are non-parboiled. So the parboiled rice varieties, they have moderate or low glycemic index. Therefore, parboiled rice is a better option for proper glycemic control. Based on the processing technique, we can categorize rice into two categories as raw rice varieties and the parboiled rice varieties. Raw rice varieties are not steamed or parboiled. Parboiled rice varieties or steamed rice varieties are subjected to parboiling or steaming. And these rice varieties can be further categorized into unpolished, mildly polished or highly polished based on the extent of milling. So, unpolished parboiled rice varieties have the lowest glycemic index, while highly polished raw rice varieties have the highest glycemic index. So we have to select the proper rice variety for good glycemic control. When we take the white rice varieties, when it is in the form of raw rice without parboiling or steaming, we call it as sudu kakulu, and that has a high glycemic index. If it is parboiled, it has moderate or low glycemic index, but what we see in the market commonly is highly polished sudu kakulu, that is the raw rice form. And also we see red rice varieties in the market. If they are in the form of raw rice without parboiling or steaming, we call it as ratu kakulu. They have high glycemic index. And if those are parboiled, they have moderate or low glycemic index. They could be in the form of unpolished, mildly polished or highly polished forms. In the market we get parboiled rice varieties. Some of the samba varieties are parboiled, and essentially nadu varieties are parboiled. They have low or moderate glycemic index. They could be unpolished, mildly polished or highly polished rice varieties. If the parboiled rice variety is mildly polished, they tend to have low glycemic index. Basmati is another rice variety present in Sri Lankan market. It's not a parboiled rice. Its raw variety has medium glycemic index. It is there in the form of red rice variety and also white rice variety, as you can see in this slide. In Sri Lanka, we have traditional rice varieties, though not available in large scale. Raw rice varieties of Suandal, Mavi, Masuran, Tikri and Gonabaru have low glycemic index. Other traditional rice varieties also have low glycemic index when they are parboiled. Have you changed your mind now? I know most of you have been consuming raw red rice, that is ratu keku, because you were educated that way, as that is the best option. That's wrong. When you buy rice, you have to check whether it's a parboiled rice or steamed rice variety. Maybe samba or nadu or the said traditional rice varieties. Even better if the traditional rice variety is parboiled. How can you recognize whether it's parboiled or not? Ideally, it has to be mentioned in the pack. But in the local market, that detail is not there in the label. Other way that you can find out is that the parboiled rice grain is harder than the raw rice grain. It is not easily breakable. Basmati is another option that can be used by the patients with diabetes mellitus. Remember, though I'm specifically focusing on diabetes, it's good if normal healthy individuals can also consume these rice varieties if they can afford. Because in the long run, it is useful to prevent getting them diabetes.